Since the start of 2020, Saquon Barkley has only played in 15 games, and in those games has averaged 12 carries, 4.4 targets, 63 total yards, and zero point 0.2 touchdowns per game for a disappointing 10.5 PPR points per game. That is nowhere near the RB1 overall player that we saw in 2018 or even the RB10 player that we saw in 2019. Now, I know a lot of you guys have been burned by Saquon hard over the last 2 years, but my hope is to bring Saquon back into your good graces for the 2022 season, because literally every aspect of his game is about to drastically improve in this season. The first of which is going to be his overall volume, which I'm expecting to take a big jump back to elite levels this year. If you take out the game that he got hurt in last year, Barkley was on pace for over 225 carries and 58 receptions, while averaging only 65% of snaps, sharing time with Devontae Booker the entire second half of the season. Granted, the fact that I had to say that he shared time with Devontae Booker doesn't look good for my argument, so point there for the haters out there. But the fact that he was still on pace for over 280 touches as more of a part-time player speaks to the role that he had in that offense last year and the role he will have this year. And even if you are concerned about Devontae Booker's role last year, he's not even on the team. Literally, the only players behind Barkley right now are Matt Breida, Gary Brightwell, and then like 3 guys I've never even heard of. This backfield is 100% Saquon Barkley's, and honestly, 300 touches might be a floor for 2022 if he stays healthy. A big part of the volume in 2022 is going to be his receiving work, which also hasn't been the same since his rookie season. In fact, after seeing 121 targets in his first 16 games, he's seen only 139 in his 28 games since. We know the importance that receiving has on fantasy running backs, and it was a huge part of what made Saquon the RB1 in 2018, but he just hasn't had the same role since then. Enter Brian Daboll, who has made some great fantasy running backs in the past. Reggie Bush's first 1,000-yard season, Brian Daboll. Jamal Charles' resurgence to being elite after an ACL injury, Brian Daboll. And then remember that Madden 12 cover player Peyton Hillis from the Browns? Yep, that was Brian Daboll as well. Not only is Daboll going to bring in a fresh new offense, he knows that one of the main things he needs to do is get Barkley the ball in the receiving game. He's even been quoted in saying Saquon is a unique guy. You move him in different spots, that makes other guys have to learn other spots too. He's got good hands, he's a good route runner, a good runner. Try to use him the best way we can. We already heard from Giants minicamp that Barkley was utilized as a wide receiver more than ever before, and when he did line up in the backfield, he was often motioned into the slot or out wide before the snap. And then from what I've heard from training camp so far, that plan has stuck, with Barkley catching the ball not only out of the backfield, but out of bunch formations, out wide, just everywhere on the field. That utilization is going to be gold for fantasy football, and also could be what helps keep Saquon healthy over an entire season if he's out catching the ball in space and able to do his thing rather than just running it straight up the middle every single time he touches the ball. Since 2000, every running back with at least 200 carries and 70 receptions has finished as an RB1. And in fact, of the 33 running backs in this sample, 28 of them finished inside the top 5 and 31 of them were inside the top 8. Let me remind you that Barkley was already on pace for 58 receptions last year, so getting 12 more doesn't seem all that difficult in a new Giants offense, especially with a focus on getting the ball to Saquon in the receiving game. Another aspect that should greatly improve for Barkley next year is touchdowns. Despite having over 200 touches last year, Barkley only scored 4 total touchdowns, 2 on the ground and then 2 through the air. But I don't think I need to remind you that the Giants offense last year was just bad. They were so bad. They were second to last in the league in points per game, and even then were barely ahead of the Jaguars for last place. Now let me read you the Giants points totals when Saquon returned from injury over the entire second half of the year. 10, 13, 9, 21, 6, 10, 3, and 7. That's an average of 9.9 points per game. And even the game that they scored 21, that was only because they scored twice in the final 5 minutes of the game because the Chargers pulled all their starters because they were up by 30. For 95% of that game, the Giants were held to 7 total points, which would drop their average down to 8.1 points per game.
Inconceivable!
Under Daboll, this team is going to be way better than they were last year. I mean, especially the second half of last year, and they will score more points. And then when Saquon is the best playmaker on the team, he should be the betting favorite to score a lot of those touchdowns, right? I mean, we don't need him to score 15 plus touchdowns like Eckler or what JT did last year, but around double digits would work fine. I mean, you remember that sample of 33 running backs from just a minute ago? 15 of them had 11 or fewer total touchdowns, finishing as top 5 or top 8 running backs in those seasons. Last year, even half of the top 10 running backs had 10 or fewer touchdowns, including the RB3 overall Najee Harris. Saquon himself had 15 and 8 total touchdowns in his first 2 seasons playing on 5 and 4 win teams. So even while the Giants aren't going to be a good team this year, they should be a lot better than they were last year, and Saquon is going to benefit from that, especially in the touchdown department. Lastly, the best part about Saquon right now is his current dynasty price, as he's currently a mid-second round startup pick in 1 QB leagues and has been that way since the beginning of 2022. This entire offseason has been the absolute cheapest he has ever been in his career, even cheaper than before he was drafted even. This reminds me a lot of Joe Mixon last year, where he showed elite fantasy production, but we remembered more recent injuries that derailed his 2020 season. That led to Mixon's price being the cheapest it ever was prior to last year, and then look what happened. In already established leagues, he's very available through trades as well, like Saquon and Jarvis Landry for Akers, Terrace Marshall, and Pat Freiermuth, or even adding to Saquon to get Cam Akers. You got Saquon and Amon-Ra for Mooney, Edwards in the 103 and 202, and then Saquon for a single 2023 first, which I think is a great move if you're competing. More than likely, the player who has Saquon in your league is probably a bit worried, and if you give them what they perceive as a more stable asset, they'll probably take it and then sell you Saquon on a discount. There is, of course, the downside that maybe Barkley just isn't the player he once was and is injury prone. If he fails to produce well this year, he may not get re-signed by the Giants and may even get Melvin Gordon or James Conner signing with a new team next year. I do think that's a low probability, but it's there nonetheless. But I also think that that's baked into his current price, which is what is making him cheaper than he's ever been. There is also the fact that he's 25 years old, meaning he's coming to the age where he'll never gain dynasty value again despite elite production. And I get this argument a lot too, but what I think you're getting with Barkley, if you're buying him now, is an elite running back for the next 2 or 3 years. And if he produces like that, he'll maintain his value over that time as well. I mean, Kamara and Aaron Jones are a round and a half below Barkley right now at 27 years old, which is a fine enough value drop for me over the next 2 years while I'm still getting that elite production from him. If you're curious hearing about 2 more players that I think have a great chance to explode in 2022, I highly recommend checking out this video right up here.